opportunities this year to speak at community colleges, and I have been just enormously impressed by the quality of the office personnel. Every time I call, every time I write, every time I ask a question, I am treated with such kindness and respect that I admire the work that all of you do. And so with those few opening words, you have in your packet a handout that says Humor and the Healthy Workplace. And if you look at it, you will notice that it has an enormous amount of white space in it. And the reason for that is that I want this to be a conference for you and a session for you to give you an opportunity to write notes to yourself about ideas that you think might be helpful in your workplace, rather than to treat this as some kind of abstract conference. Now, before the conference, I was talking to Jan and a few of the others, Nancy, and they did express some interest in my Uncle Patty Costigan. And he's originally from Ireland, Patty is, and he's a less than famous inventor. I know you think his name Patio Costigan, and maybe he invented patio furniture or something like that. But no, he was never that successful. I would like to tell you a few things he did invent, though. He invented Preparation G. He invented a soft drink called 6-Up. High-calorie Melba toast, for those who like the taste of Melba toast, but it doesn't have enough calories for it. He wrote the song Tea for One. And his invention that really got him in trouble was a snooze button for smoke alarms. And so they sent him back to Ireland, and I got a letter from him. Of course, we always worry about him, and I did receive a letter from him. And things are going well over there now for my Uncle Patty. He actually has 500 people under him now. He's mowing lawns in a cemetery. But the bad news from Ireland is that Uncle Seamus died. Now, I don't know whether you know about Uncle Seamus, but he was the famous Costigan over there. He worked in the Bushmill distillery, you know, where they make that famous Irish whiskey. And he fell into a vat of the whiskey. And according to Patty, he didn't die right away. He got out twice to go to the bathroom. But in keeping with his wishes, Seamus wanted to be cremated, and it was the grandest cremation in all of Ireland, because he burned for 3 days. We're going to have some fun. We have 3 objectives, and I hope by the end of the 2 hours we have achieved them all. As you will notice, the objectives as listed are to focus on some really very practical applications of humor. First of all, to talk about humor and the healthy body, and how we can use and incorporate humor in our everyday life to help us physiologically remain healthy. Secondly, and probably you all have this need, I know I do in my work, it is the need to use humor as a stimulant to creativity. That you get those times when you're kind of locked down and you can't get an idea, or you've got a problem that's perplexing you, and if you use humor, it kind of frees up some idea tracks that we haven't been using and gives us some ways of solving problems. And the third way of using humor will be to talk about our life attitudes, and that's probably a key element of everything I have to say. That there are many things in life that we cannot control, that they're just given. We have to face them. That's our life force. But there is one thing we can control, and that is our attitude. So here we go on this journey through humor and the healthy workplace. This is the opening slide, and I want to ask, how many of you find that picture mildly amusing? Okay. So do I. I don't know what it is. Every time I look at them, I wonder, go ask her if she's catching any butterflies. But the thing of it is there's a real intensity about it, and that's one of the things we'll be talking about this morning. How many of you in the course, now we're talking about humor in Europe, how many of you in the course of maybe, let's take the last year, or maybe 2 years, I want to make it a nice enough period to talk, during the last 2 years, how many of you have ever experienced stress on the job? Okay, well, a couple. Okay. Even deeper question, how many of you have had days when you've just kind of burned out? So let's say some things. Let's say holistic health. Holistic health. And bye burnout. That's what we're going to talk about in this first section, how to get after that. The big three, in terms of humor and health, involve this kind of framework. Wait, I've got this. This is a joke, okay. God, I hope it's a joke. But anyhow, every now and then, I know that in my job, that I get to taking myself too seriously. And sometimes I even think of myself as gifted. So here is my gifted part. You know, and to this day, parents will run up to me and say, "Oh, my daughter's in the gifted program," and I smile. Because they think of that particular cartoon. But I have this one thing. I have a friend back in Illinois, and when I was diagnosed about 15 years ago as having hypertension, high blood pressure, the doc said the usual things, you know, you got to relax more and things like that. And so I really took his advice seriously, and I began to read a lot of the literature about the relaxation response and so forth. And it kind of led me off into reading about Eastern mystical religions and kind of comparing those in Christianity and the traditions that I was brought up in. And I found over in Eastern religions that they meditate a lot. And I found out about a lot of their other beliefs, like reincarnation and so on. And I have a friend of mine who's a minister, a priest back in Illinois, and he found out about my interest in this. And so he wrote me a letter. And he said, "Jim, I think this poem would be one you would be interested in." And so I got the poem out of the letter, and it was a poem about reincarnation. And I thought to myself, well, how thoughtful. You know, here this fellow finds my interest, and he picks a poem and sends it to me so I'll have something to think about. Well, I'll share the poem with you, and I'm not sure that my conclusion about his thoughtfulness was right. The poem goes like this. What is reincarnation? A farmer asked his friend. Well, it starts, his old pal told him, when your life comes to an end. They wash your face, and comb your hair, and clean your fingernails, and put you in a padded box away from life's travails. Now that box and you goes in a hole that's been dug in the ground. Reincarnation starts in when you're planted beneath that mound. Them clods melt down along with the box, and you who is inside, that's when you're beginning your transformation ride. In a while, some grass will grow upon your rendered mound, until someday upon that spot a lonely flower is found. And then a horse may wander by and graze upon that flower that once was you and now has become a vegetative flower. Now, that flower that horse done ate, along with its other feed, becomes bone and fat and muscle, essential to that steed. But there's a part that he can't use, and so it passes through. And there it lies upon the ground, this thing that once was you. chance I should happen by and see this on the ground, I'll stop a while and ponder on this object that I found. And I'll think about life and death and reincarnation and such, and I'll come away concluding, why, you ain't changed that much. That's another line I have trouble saying with a straight face. Boy, you sure haven't changed much. I think little private jokes keep us alive. So, we look at the big three in terms of holistic health. And the big three really are genetics, which we have no control over. We roll the dice, we have mom and dad, and we get the kind of makeup that comes from their background. The second one is lifestyle, and good grief, who knows, we get that shoved down our throat day in and day out. Broccoli. Had a little bowl of broccoli for breakfast this morning, covered with honey and sugar, but and then lifestyle, of course, we really stress that, and I think more people in our society are really looking at their lifestyle and taking a big serious look at it. But the one we want to focus on in this workshop is the one on attitude, and how our attitude influences our health. And I have studied this subject really intensely now for the last 3 or 4 years, and have come up with some very exciting information for you and me. This morning, you know, we've laughed a little bit together, and we've kind of chuckled and so forth. What that does for us is amazingly healthy. What it does is it increases our heart rate. It's kind of like internal jogging. It increases our circulation of blood. And one of the things that's very, very important to remember is that disease cells are anaerobic. That is, they function in an environment that is relatively free of oxygen. And healthy cells, or white cells, are aerobic. That is, they function in environments that are rich in oxygen. And so when we laugh and we stimulate our system and increase our heartbeat, we're actually sending healthy kinds of cells out through all parts of our body. And that's why people who laugh a lot and who have positive attitudes tend to be sick less. Because when we are angry and depressed and life is getting us down, our bodies become more susceptible to illness. We don't breathe as deeply, we don't laugh, and we become more and more susceptible to the kinds of viruses and germs that float around in our environment. They're there all the time. It's just when we become weak that they become strong. Another thing it does is if we laugh really good and hard, we'll start to cough. And it clears up our respiratory passages. In addition, when we laugh, it moves our muscles in such a way that they push against our thymus. And that thymus sends out kinds of notions of enjoyment to the rest of our body. Now, I remember, as I look back on my life, some of the most enjoyable moments of my life were when we had little babies. My wife and I have 4 children. And you get a little baby who doesn't know any words. You didn't tell him about Uncle Patty or anything. But you go gitchy gitchy goo, and the baby gets tickled about that or whatever, and they start to laugh. And they just have a wonderful time. And that's a form of humor called the funny face. And that's where clowns come from. That's why we can still laugh at the kinds of things clowns do, because it's a funny face. And before we ever know words or anything else, we have this capacity to laugh, which is a very, very healthy thing. Our brain secretes at least 3 dozen different kinds of enzymes and hormones and so forth in various combinations. So if you can imagine the mathematical, statistical possibilities of all of those things, when we laugh, it sends messages to our nerve center of a healthy kind, and the chemical mix is very, very rich in those kinds of things that give us a healthy outlook and help us to resist disease. This kind of material that I'm presenting to you right now is being used in many forms of therapy for people who have life-threatening illnesses. that they go to sessions in which they laugh and they enjoy each other, and that this actually helps their immune system function more effectively. In fact, when we laugh, we release a particular chemical called endorphins, and these are kind of our body's natural painkiller. And they go out and they help us relax. And oftentimes, you know, if we have a good laugh sometime during the day, even though it's been a tense day, there's a possibility that it will help us to sleep more effectively. I remember a while back I had a very stressful day at work, and I said to myself, you've been stressed. And so I got home and I talked to my wife and I said, you know, I just need to go have a good laugh and get myself back in perspective. So we picked up the Hayes Daily Disappointment, which is our local newspaper, and there was a movie on called Big, starring Tom Hanks, and it says a delightful comedy. So we went to the movie, and I sat there, and you know, during the opening part of the movie, I was amused, but my day was still telling on me, and I wasn't really all that relaxed. But there was one scene about halfway through the movie, and I don't know whether you saw it, but he goes into this party, and he's a little kid's mind in a big body, and they have all of these hors d'oeuvres, and one of them is a baby ear of corn, like you get in Chinese restaurants, and he picks that up and eats it like this. And that's all I needed, boy. That would be starting me laughing. And from then on, I was okay. So there are positive laughter, and I'm glad there's a thing that's called glastolalia, that is giving voice to your laughter. A lot of people are afraid to do that. They kind of go, you know, and men especially, we don't want to seem like we're laughing out loud. What happens, and I mentioned those chemicals, if they get going strong enough, then our body chemistry actually breaks down and is transformed. And if we start laughing hard enough, the bonds between our muscles and all that break down, and we can't stand up. We actually literally have to grab something. And if it's really hard enough, we'll lay down and roll on the ground. And if it really is tough, we'll wet our pants. So, why don't some people laugh as they're afraid of wetting their pants? Let me give you some examples of actual studies that have been done. At Loma Linda College out in California, they brought a group of 500 people in. Before they came in, they took a blood test. Then they presented a very, very funny comedian, and everybody laughed and had a good time. And then, during the course of this, they drew blood samples. And at the end of that, they compared the pre-comedy blood to the post-comedy blood. They found that the post-comedy blood was richer in white cells that fight germs and infections and disease. They found that endorphins had been released. They found that the general makeup of the blood was entirely more healthy after people had laughed than it was before. As another example of this kind of mind-body connection, in other words, this morning as we're laughing, it's kind of like fun, and we kind of maybe feel a little giddy about it, but we're actually doing something good for our health. That's the way God gave us to stay healthy, to do this kind of thing, kind of laughing. There was a football game in California. During this football game, 3 or 4 people wandered down to the health station saying, I don't feel very good. I've got stomach cramps, And so the nurse asked them what they'd been doing. And it so happened that they had all had a coat out of this kind of dispensing machine that was under the stadium. And the nurse goes, oh, good grief, maybe that copper tubing is eroding off into the syrup, or maybe it's a bad batch of syrup or whatever. And these people have food poisoning. So she went up to the loudspeaker announcer and told him, would you make an announcement that please not to drink any pop out of the machine under the stadium because it's causing food poisoning. The announcement was made, whereupon about 400 people in the audience began to experience stomach cramps, vomiting, and so forth. They had ambulances from 5 hospitals were being rushed to the stadium to pick up people who were actually retching and so forth. And the first aid stations were overflowing. They were rushing people to the hospital. Somebody came out, checked the machine. There was nothing wrong with it. Evidently, these people had something else. Went back upstairs and announced to the crowd, no, it's not the Coke machine. Now, how would you feel in that audience if here you are retching and being sick? And they say, well, you can be sick, but it's not that. How about the people in the ambulances? Hey, come on back, the game's not over yet. So the end product of it is our mind and our body work together. And it's what I'm suggesting in terms of holistic health is that we really should try to put humor in our life as part of every work day and as part of our general family arrangements and all of those kinds of things. My wife and I are having a lot of fun this semester. We're both working on a humor course at Fort Hays, and we're just having a delightful time thinking of jokes and quips and doing things like that. One last study I'd like to talk to you about in terms of kind of making this connection between how healthy we are and whether we laugh would be a study that was done in Brighton, England, of 411 cancer patients. And they were scheduled for chemotherapy, and as part of the treatment, as you know, you have to sign an informed consent. This was an experimental study, and so this is what they were involved with. They were involved in being in this experiment. They signed the informed consent, and as part of that, it mentioned in that consent form that they could expect to lose hair from undergoing this therapy, that there would be hair loss involved with the chemotherapy. So they all signed. They were all given the treatment, except 30% of those participating in the study were given sugar pills, placebos. Now, the amazing statistic is that all 411 people lost hair. In other words, there is an enormous connection between how we think and see the world and how the world becomes for us. And so when I ask you, and I ask myself, to think about how to put humor in our life, it is a very important, although it is a very fun-filled kind of thing, it's a very important kind of thing. And so we can look for ways to do that. Are there any questions about this particular information? Either I'm being exceptionally clear. No, but that's all right. You've all been way too relaxed here. Would you all please stand up? Yeah, you might want to put this is our first activity. When Dr. Cox said involving, this is it. Okay, this is going to be hard now. I would like to have you put your hands at your side, put a very serious look on your face. Okay, very serious here. Now I want you all with me take a very, very deep breath. Now smile. Now isn't it interesting that when we pull air into our body and we smile, it comes out as laughter. I mean, that's how far we are away from laughter. I would suggest when you feel that next sense of stress, or that next sense of burnout, take a deep breath. Serious voice. And then smile. Now this is going to be even tighter. Serious face. Good. Think about counting. Watch it. Now take a deep breath. I want you to smile. Look at the person. See, that's the thing about humor. but it's when we laugh with other people, the laughter is kind of magnified. And so that's why sometimes if we were in a stress-filled period, to go to a movie or go out with a friend, or just have, if you have an office mate who's here at this conference with you, to have that kind of, as your kind of little secret thing that you do, you know, let's breathe and smile. One of the things that I personally do, and I've seen this as a very healthy sign at a number of the community colleges I've been to, it is just a little place away from everything else where you can put up those cartoons or poems or statements that mean something to you. Our office personnel came up with a great one a little while ago. My secretary's name is Kathy Meyer, and she is just the greatest person in the world. And we had another secretary in our office whose name was Tracy Tifo. Can you say Tifo? Nice name. So she was pregnant, and so there's all of the excitement about, you know, there's a new baby coming. And during the course of this, we got into discussions of what to name the baby. And we finally voted that the name should be Taco. Taco Tifo, you know. You know, I hope it was a little girl, they named her Gretchen, but, you know, I just can't resist every time I see her calling her Taco, you know. So we look around for humor in various places. A lot of times when you go to church, you'll notice they hand out a bulletin or something like that. It's a folded piece of paper, and inside is all of the events that are going on in the church during the week that they don't want to spend time during the sermon talking about. So you can just look in there and see when the events are. As you know, and I know, and sending stuff off from our offices, occasionally we don't proofread quite as carefully as we might, and little things slip by us, and away we go, like the comment that was made that we were at Seward County and that it's March rather than Butler County in April. But, I mean, you know, small, you know, we all know where we are, except for last night, I guess. So anyhow, here are some actual statements that were in church bulletins. And this is looking for humor. This afternoon there will be a meeting in the south and north ends of the church. Children will be baptized at both ends. Tuesday at 4 p.m. there will be an ice cream social. All ladies giving milk will please come early. Thursday at 5 p.m. there will be a meeting of the Little Mothers Club. All wishing to become little mothers will please meet the minister in his study. On Sunday, a special collection will be taken to defray expenses for the new carpet. All wishing to do something on the carpet will please come forward and get a piece of paper. The ladies of the church have cast off clothing of every kind. And they may be seen in the church basement. When I was a youngster back in Illinois growing up, I was very fortunate. I received a basketball scholarship to play basketball at Illinois State. And one of the things they did in the town where I lived was a hometown of State Farm Insurance. And State Farm is a rather big car insurer. And so they, in the summer, they hire athletes to come in and do kind of the dirty work that comes around all year long, but nobody else wants to do it. And one of the dirtiest of all dirty jobs was destroying old claims. If you can imagine, this is the days before computers, so everything had to be put on paper, and then you'd make up the claim file, and then you would put it in a box, and then it would be in a file, and then those files would get old, and you'd move them over. And they had absolutely a 9-story building just entirely full of old claims. And so what we would do in the summer is we would go in and look through the claims, because you couldn't throw them away if there was a recent piece of correspondence. You had to save them. But if there was nothing in that after the liability date, you could just take it. And so we would take the paper out of those and run them through a paper cutter. And as you can imagine, looking through those old claims was really kind of dusty, tiresome. But one thing we used to do to kind of keep us alive while doing that was there's a little part on the form of a State Farm claim that says, in 25 words or less, explain what happened in the accident. And as people are wont to do, there were some rather interesting explanations. For example, one person wrote, "Coming home, I drove into the wrong house and collided with a tree I don't have." The other car collided with mine without giving warning of its intentions. I collided with a stationary truck coming the other way. A truck backed through my windshield into my wife's face. Now, I want you to listen to this one. Guess who gets blamed on this one? A pedestrian hit me and went under my car. Gotta watch out for those pedestrians. The guy was all over the road. I had to swerve a number of times before I hit him. I pulled away from the side of the road, looked at my mother-in-law, and headed over the embankment. To the doctor with rear end trouble. When my universal joint gave out, causing me to have an accident. I was sure the old fellow would never make it to the other side of the road, so I ran over him. I saw a slow-moving, sad-faced old gentleman as he bounced off the roof of my car. And the indirect cause of the accident was a little guy in a big car with a big mouth. So, you know, it is possible. I know I wander around in bookstores now and then and just pick up things. Right now I'm reading a thing, 6,000 of Milton Berle's best jokes. They're all alphabetized, and you know, go home and just sit there and maybe go through one category or another. If you ever look through the want ads, you might see some funny things there. I just noticed this one. Computer error has resulted in a large supply of electric-powered swivel chairs that make approximately 150 high-speed revolutions per minute automatically as body weight hits the seat. Excellent bargain for people who are nausea resistant. Right box SC. I can just see, sit here, please. Here's another one. Are you allergic to dogs and you still want to protect your hearth and home? We have the perfect solution. Our trained snapping turtles don't shed, don't bark, or beg to be petted, but they will strike fear into the heart of any thug. Our little guardians are well trained to lunge at ankles. Heavy boots are available for members of your household. Write for information to Watch Turtles Incorporated, WM Box SK2. Here's one that's kind of an interesting typo. Important notice. If you are one of the thousands who bought the book for parachute enthusiasts entitled Easy Skydiving in One Fell Swoop, please make the following correction on page 8, line 7. Change state zip code to pull ripcord. Finally, distress sale. Marginally effective calculators, pocket size, guaranteed to be 98% accurate. Perfect gift for easygoing students, tax accountants, stockbrokers, etc. So these are factors in terms of holistic health, that we understand the mind-body connection, that we look at attitude as part of the triad of our health: genetics, lifestyle, attitude. And that we really actually attempt to control some of our attitude by putting laughter into our life. It's really a lot of fun to do. And in our office now, we do have a place where we can put up cartoons and so forth. And humor is very, very acceptable. It's the kind of thing. Now, I know sometimes we have to control the decorum of our office, and we have to be serious and we have to be professional. But there is a time that we can back away from that. And when we can share with each other our need to laugh. So I'm going to talk about some attitudinal things, and perhaps we can think about those as ways of thinking internally to keep this whole holistic health going. How many know this word? Some people do. Good. It's a very important word in terms of holistic health. The word is yoga-whippy. Can we all say that? Yoga-whippy. And it stands for, you only get out what you put in. Amazing information, isn't it? Really what this is the principle of involvement. I have studied very carefully the literature about people who have been successful, people who have lived satisfying lives, and people who talk with enthusiasm about what they do. And one thing that I have found is a common thread in all of those things is this particular attitude, yoga-whippy. And so whatever position we're in, the position you're in, the position I'm in, if we have energy, yoga-whippy, and we put in to our position that enthusiasm and energy, that is exactly the kinds of things we'll get out. About 3 months ago, I was in Boston, Massachusetts, giving a speech, and I had a chance to buy, well, I shouldn't say I had a chance to buy, I bought a scalper ticket to the Boston Celtics game, and I paid $50 for the ticket. I had the top seat in Boston Garden. I was in the very last row. In fact, literally, I had to stand up and grab hold of a rafter beam because the guy in front of me was leaning over like that and I couldn't see the court. But it was the top seat in the place, and I enjoyed telling people when I got back, you know, had the top seat in the place. Wow, how much it cost you? $50. It was actually a $7 ticket, but anyhow. During the course of that game, they played the Atlanta Hawks, and one of my heroes, Larry Bird, was in the game playing for Boston. And in the course of that game, he scored 50 points. At the end of the game, with the crunch on, he scored 105, 102. He sank a three-point shot. And so it was a real thrilling thing for me. I just really enjoyed myself. But as I was going back to the hotel, I got to thinking about it. If you've read his biography and things about his life, you will know that he is a person with yoga-whippy. When you watch him run, it looks like he's water skating. You know, his feet don't come off the ground very high. He kind of shuffles. But he spends about 2 hours before practice starts practicing shooting. When practice is over, he's the fellow that stays there and shoots free throws. He makes about 95% of his free throws. In other words, he puts into his trade and it gives back to him. And this is the way we have to look at our life. That, you know, in terms of our marriages, in terms of our work, in terms of our association with friends, that we will get from those things the kinds of things that we put into them. And so I know that one of the things that I said at the very outset is very important to me, that we have to foster in our workplace, if they are to be healthy, a caring environment. Now, one of the most important relational facts of life is that we cannot control a relationship. We can only participate. There are a lot of people that I work with that I wish would change in some way or another to make them more easy for me to get along with. But I can't force that change. All I can do, and all you can do, is be the kind of person who has yoga with you and puts into your workplace environment and your home environment those kinds of things that you want to get at. And one of the things that is the key here is something I'm going to talk a lot about a little later on, and that's the notion of our own self-esteem. The person we have to be comfortable with when we go to bed at night is ourselves. Have we given yoga with to that day? And I know some people, and I work with a lot of people in this, who work in very trying situations. And all I have to offer them is we can't control relationships, we only participate. And number two, yoga with it. We only get out what we put in. And I remember a time in my life when all of our 4 children were teenagers. Now, you talk about yoga whippy periods. Oh, Dad, that's dumb. Oh, my, man, if I heard that once, you know, I began to doubt. I went back and would get my PhD out and fondle it and said, I'm not dumb, I'm not dumb. I remember one time at lunch, one of the kids, we got into an argument, and one of the kids said, well, my teacher said, and then she gave, and she was in 2nd grade at the time. I said, well, I wouldn't want to refute that. The second thing, and this is a great one because it's so dumb. How about that? Wherever you are, be there. You may say, well, that's pretty hard not to do. Have you ever seen people who are not where they are? Teach for a while. I remember a student came to me a little while ago. He said, you know, he said, Jim, you've asked us to read this chapter, and I want you to know that I'm a slow reader. What should I do? I said, read it slowly. This is a $28 million idea. What it simply means is that, you know, there are points and moments in our job when we are really on call. And that's why I started with the compliment that, you know, so many times as I've contacted the community colleges, I've been so impressed. Because I am ultra-sensitive to that. To whether I'm treated in a way that shows respect and dignity. Because that means that I am talking to somebody who's there, working, being a representative of the community college, making me feel good about it, making me feel good about having contacted them. And that's wherever you are, be there. We had a secretary in my office this last semester, and she was working on some things at the typewriter, and a student came in, and the student said, I have a test for Dr. Flake's course, you know, and she just, well, it's over in one of those boxes, and just went on typing. And so, you know, the fellow went over and got that, and when they said, what should I do? And said, go over there and take it. And so it was just kind of a non-event. But it was an example of somebody not being there. So a little later on that afternoon, I called the secretary in, and I said, you know, let's just chat for a second. I said, you know, this morning when that student came in, you told him what the test was, and I said, you know, I really want to tell you that we're here to serve those students. And that when they come into this office, we want them to know this is a place that cares about them. So when he walks in or she walks in and they say, where is this? You know, we stop what we're doing. We jump up and say, oh yes, I think I know what that is. And we go get it and we hand it to them and we smile and say, would you care to go over here and do that? And you know, the difference in the way that person feels about us is just night and day. I fly a lot, and this is where this idea came from. An airline, SAS, that lost $1 million, hired a new chief executive who put into effect this program. Wherever you are, be there. Remember what we're about. And so, they started doing this. They turned the $1 million loss into a $27 million profit the next year. Why? Because people were there. And so it's a $28 million idea, but it's a very simple idea, isn't it? I mean, you know, it's just being there and remembering what we're about and remembering our care and concern for those around us. One last idea in terms of attitude, and that is the notion of how do people talk about us? And how do we talk about ourselves? That's even bigger. Well, the 3M company up in Minneapolis spent $1 million conducting this study because they were really interested in what do people think of us. And as part of that study, one of the major findings was a rather interesting one. They found that if they did something right, that the people would tell 3 people. That's nice. So if somebody came to our department and the secretary jumps up and gives them the thing and they walk out saying, well, you know, they may say, well, you know, they really treated me nicely over there. But they won't tell a lot of them, just sort of. Now, that's the good news. Good news, bad news. The bad news is if we do it poorly, we do something wrong, they will tell 11 people. And this is why, I want to tell you, have you noticed how sometimes there's kind of atmospheres of negativism can build in environments? It's just because people get to talking negatively. I know, for one thing, at our university, I have stopped going and sitting with a particular group of people at coffee time. Why? Because they're always talking down on this bottom 11, you know, the things that are going wrong. And I found that that was seeping into my attitudes, too, and that it was easy. Because everyone has in parts of their job things that are not just perfect, that they write down and say, I wish I could change this. But if you dwell on that and make that the focus of it, it can change our whole attitude. And this is the important thing. If our attitudes are angry, depressed, moody, put upon, we feel used, and that, this will affect our physical health. Our body-mind connection will say, don't go back into that environment. And all of a sudden, you start to feel a tickle in your throat, and it's kind of sore, and you think, oh, good grief, I got that flu. Calling me, I don't feel good. On the other hand, you know, we work to keep the positive attitudes going, and in that way, we have some ways of being involved. Okay, are there questions about these attitudes? Well, okay, we've finished part 1 then, which is humor and the healthy body. And we've talked about the mind-body connection. We've talked about how to look for humor. And we've talked about these ways of looking at ourselves and looking at our workplace and trying to accumulate humor. So let's all say it. Holistic health. And bye Vernon. Okay, great. Now the next one is creativity. And I just love doing creativity. It's fun for me because the whole notion well, before we do creativity, one last joke. How do you like this one? These are people standing on the ledge. And it has been recently brought to my attention, Melty, that you are a depressing person to work with. I've often thought of Xeroxing this one and sending it to somebody at 4 days. And saying, guess which role you're playing. Okay, one other benefit, and it's not a health benefit, but it's just a side benefit, is creativity. How many of you have a real solid hobby that you can do outside your workplace? Okay, great. That's really important. You know, it's just something that keeps me alive. I play racquetball, and I play the guitar in a folk bar at church, and those kinds of activities put your mind off on something else. And I often find that when you're doing those things, your good work ideas pop in. that, you know, your mind is playing around and free. So let me start this creative thing with the notion of a test. I always like that word, test. Strikes fear into the hearts of everyone. Now, don't be afraid of being right or wrong, okay? So it's not that kind of test. I'm going to ask you to read this over very quickly and count the number of F's in it, and when you have the number, yell out in a very loud voice how many there are. Okay? Directions clear? I'm going to count and then yell. Oh! Okay. Go. 3, 4, 6. Let's say it. 3, 4, 6. 5. Somewhere. 5. Good. Nobody said 2, so that's out. Okay, we look at it. There are 6.
What?
Finished files, that's 2. A result of 3, 4, 5, of many years. Now, for those of you who yelled 3, I want you to know that I yelled 3 real loud, and then got in an argument with the people who said 6. So, what happens, and this is the thing about creativity, is that oftentimes we get trapped into our normal ways of thinking about things. And one of the things that really break us out of that is doing something wrong. You know, some of the greatest recipes, some of the greatest inventions are all the result of mistakes. My cooking is generally very creative because it's filled with mistakes, you know. This calls for lobster, I'll use tuna, you know. So, those kinds of things come into play. How many can see the words? Win. Right. No, it's Jesus. I'm sorry. Close, but yeah, that does say win. And it's just a matter of switching our perspective on things. I got involved, I wrote a musical comedy about 7 years ago, and I found that, you know, you really had to break out of your sense of, oh, this sounds terrible, this is dumb, and be less judgmental and less restrictive. Let's do some more exercises. You can sit during this exercise. And I would like to have you all raise your hand. Like this. Good. Okay, wiggle your fingers like we're kind of like this. Okay. Maybe just put up 2 fingers. Okay, 1 finger, 3 fingers, 4 fingers. Notice how this is a family show. So. Okay, now I'd like to have you form a kind of okay sign. Like that. Okay, would you put that on your chin? Take the ability to laugh at ourselves and to look at our mistakes and so forth, and not to, you know, a lot of people, when they make a mistake or something like that, they just become very introverted and they self-judgmental and so forth. But that is not a creative nor a healthy attitude. I'll tell you, one of the inventions we're enjoying today, the light bulb, was invented by a man who could not read German very well, Thomas Alva Edison. And he read a German journal in which, and if you've ever studied German, you know how contus their sentences become, read a sentence in which he thought it said you could make a bulb that would light for long periods of time out of incandescent fibers. Well, what the sentence actually said is you cannot make a bulb that will gleam for a long time out of incandescent fibers. So he was just 100% wrong in reading that, but he was thinking that you could. He went about to see if he could. He tried over 1,040 experiments with various kinds of things for incandescence. They all failed. He was interviewed by a newspaper reporter who said to him, "Mr. Edison, why do you go on in this foolish quest for the invention of a bulb that will stay lit when you know that it cannot be done? You've had 1,030 failures." To which he replied, "Young man, I have not had 1,030 failures. I have found out 1,030 things that won't work." And he went on, and he eventually found the fabric and the kind of metal that would hold the charge of electricity, and invented the incandescent bulb. And so part of creativity is to really involve ourselves and feel good about ourselves in terms of the fact that not everything in our life works out just exactly the way we want it. So if you would, say with me the letters P-O-T-S.
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 Pots. 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 P-O-T-S. P-O-T-S. Pots. Pots. What do you do when you get to a green light? That's it. No, go. The green light, stop. You know what? Yeah, Potts is stopped backwards. And you know, and that's what lack of creativity is. It's just getting down this little rut and going on, and boy, it becomes very, very hard. And laughter is a way of jogging us out of that, and jogging us towards kind of a new sense of freedom and discovery and so forth. And this is where a lot of good ideas in office practices come from people who are, you know, make a mistake, laugh, say, hey, you know, what could we do about that? And look at some new adventurous way to do things. And so let me give you an example from a study we did last year at Fort Hays, of a graduate student named Arthur Kaw, who came to us from Sydney, Australia, of all places. And I got to talking about, well, does humor actually make people more creative? Well, we know one thing from our first unit here about holistic health, that it alters mind-body chemistry. And so that we actually are physically different people after we've laughed. So we got to thinking, well, if our blood chemistry changes, does that also make us more creative? And so we decided to design an experiment to see if this could be done. So we got 10 groups of 5 people in each group, and we assigned them a task. And we got 10 more groups of 5 people each, and we assigned them the same task. Now, one of the problems we have at Fort Hays is that our students, a lot of them, are very independent. And although we have all kinds of student services, from test counseling and, you know, anxiety and health, if they have health problems, we have all of these student services. A lot of times our students won't go. They'll say, oh, I can take care of that myself. I had a student who almost didn't graduate because of test anxiety, and I could never get the student to go over and get counseling on test anxiety. The student kept saying, I think I can solve this myself. And I said, you know, why would you let that stand? Well, you know, I think that I can handle it. Just let me try it a little more. So anyhow, this was the big problem, and this is what these groups were going to work on. So we taught them the techniques of brainstorming. And this is a technique I'll talk about in just a second. The techniques of brainstorming. We taught each group, all of the people in the study, the techniques of brainstorming. We gave them the problem. how can we get students to use student services on a more regular basis? We explained brainstorming. We set Group A to work, the 10 groups, and to come up with ideas. The other 10 groups, we gave them the same instruction, gave them the same problem, but before we started them to work, we played a humorous tape. Bill Cosby's visit to the dentist. Okay. Then we asked them to work on the problem. Then, guess what? The groups that laughed before they began to work came up with twice as many ideas as the group that didn't laugh. Over 10 ideas per group, whereas the groups who did not have stimulation through laughter had trouble coming up with 5. In other words, our group was more productive. And if I were richer, and Fort Hays was richer, and the state of Kansas was richer, this weekend, the results of that study are being presented in Detroit, Michigan, at the Central States Communication Convention to a group about how to use humor. It's just the fact that humor does increase our creativity. It's a very, very powerful thing. Then, and you know, if you can get little work groups, I don't know what kind of meeting the office personnel have on your campus, but if you get stuck with a very serious problem, go ahead and use brainstorming and humor as part of the way of loosening yourself up. I'll give you just 2 examples from my own consulting activities. I worked for a bank, was hired by a bank that had failed and then had reopened under new ownership. They had downsized the bank from 50 people to 30. So if you can imagine, the people who remained were just trembling because so many jobs were lost in the transition. The bank that bought out this bank was from a different town, in fact, quite far away, and so they had no affiliation with the town at all. So they took the loan portfolio and they threw out all the loans that were at least questionable in any way, thus offending about everybody who lived in town. I mean, everybody who was supposed to be anybody in this town. So here was this bank, totally downsized, and at the same time, everybody in town hating them because of the way they had treated the loan portfolio. And so I talked to the president of the bank, and she said to me, "What can we do?" And I said, "Do your people ever laugh?" And she said, "Never." And I said, "Well, let's start there." And so our first meeting, and I did 5 workshops for this bank, our first meeting was a meeting where we used humor. And we talked about humor and health and humor and creativity. And when we did the humor and creativity thing, we asked the question, what can we do to win back customers in this market? What can the bank do? We played the Bill Cosby tape, and they generated 76 ideas in the course of 5 minutes that could be used. Now, some of them weren't very useful, like give money away. Although everybody agreed that that would attract increased customer flow, it was a short-range solution. However, of the 76 ideas, 12 of them, we narrowed down, were really excellent. 4 of them we put into place within the next week. And about 2 months after that, I received a call from that bank president, and I went over to that bank for a banquet in which they celebrated the opening of their 500 senior citizen account, which is a market they really attacked when they came through the brainstorming. There was a lot of retired people there, and they could really go after it. So the end product of it is, even in very trying situations, we can use creativity as a way of stimulating idea growth and so forth. So there are some simple rules for brainstorming. I have them there on your sheet. We'll go through them. And we're going to do a brainstorming session after break. Get as many ideas as possible. That is, somebody will be assigned to be the recorder and write down every idea we come up with. Secondly, don't criticize. The one thing that stops creativity is if you look at the other person and say, "Boy, Jim, is that stupid." And you know, it's just kind of like putting a zipper on your lip, and then you say, "I'm not going to say anything else in here." Thirdly, build on spin-off ideas. Maybe somebody says something stupid, like give away money. And you go, "Hey, how about having a promotion where we give money for opening an account?" Okay, so a dumb idea can lead to a good idea. The fourth thing is quantity is important. So in the course of our doing this, we want to have as many ideas as we possibly can. And rule 5 is any question is acceptable. Any idea is acceptable. You've been delightful. We have a 15-minute break. We'll come back together at 9:30 or a little thereafter, and we'll do the rest of the creativity thing and work all the way up to lunch hour. Thank you. From what I hear from the local weather report, it's raining outside. And we all say, we love the rain. I have some friends who get very upset about the weather. And when it's rainy, they say, oh no, it's rainy. And when it's cold, they say, oh no, it's cold. And when it's hot, they say, oh no, it's hot.
Thank you.
When it's windy, they say, oh no, it's windy. And so I have given them a great suggestion.
Thank you.
I have mentioned to them that how they feel about the weather has no effect on it. And so they might as well just let it go at that. And so they found that to be a great. Now I would like to have you designate I want at least 3 or 4 people to be in a work group, and you can just stay in your seats, but identify, you're going to have to turn a little bit in order to, so that you're an identifiable work group. And there has to be at least 3 people in a group, and preferably 4. Okay, would you just kind of identify yourself as groups, point to each other. Good. Let's all say Yogo Whippy. Yogo Whippy. Okay. Now I would like to have you elect, select, nominate, or appoint somebody in that group to be the recorder. Personnel, and you're all fighting about who has to be the recorder. This is my vacation. You're the recorder. Okay, I have with me the famous Bill Cosby going to the dentist. Now I'm going to turn this microphone down so that hopefully we can all hear it. The question, though, and I want you to write the question down. Here is the question, and this is what we're going to brainstorm. I want you to make, when I say start, a big a list as possible of things that are free, that take less than 10 minutes to do, and that can improve our attitude. Okay. Things that are free, that take less than 10 minutes to do, and that can improve our attitude. Now, don't think about your husband. Maybe I should rephrase it. Okay, so first we'll listen to the tape. The assignment is clear. I have had groups come up with lists of, 10, 15 things in just 5 minutes. That is involved. So here we go.
friends of mine who happen to be dentists. And I go to the dentist regularly now. There was a time when I used to offend my mouth. Then my teeth started to offend me back. So I decided I would take care of my mouth. But I tried to explain to the dentist that the big mistake that they make is they tell us to do something, then they do something else. For instance, dentists will tell you, please do not pick your cavity with a sharp metal object. Now, there's a lot of fun in picking your cavity with a safety pin. Very fun. You hear it, ping, pong, ping, pong. So you try not to do that. Then when you get to their office and you open your mouth, the first thing they pull out is a hook made out of stainless steel, man, and they start pulling on your tooth harder than you ever would. Now, the first thing you hear, now while he was doing that, I found out something about myself. I found out that if I was ever paralyzed from the knee down, I'd be able to walk with my behind. Because while he was doing that, I just kept going. I'm sorry, I didn't sit up. I beg your pardon. I didn't know. I'm sorry. Now he finishes that. Going to give you the needle. Now regular doctors, when they give you a shot, they just go, and that's it. Dentists, the needle is about 4 feet long. Dentists study gums and teeth. They know nothing about lips because they try to pull your lips out wide enough so that the truck can get in there. Now they hit the gums, and they go in, and they stay there for 2-3 days. And you're afraid of going, please hurry up, 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 please hold on, please hurry up, please hurry up, hold on, please hurry up, please. Oh my God, please hurry up, please hurry up. And then he wants to talk to you. You ever done any fishing? Where do you usually go? Machine. Now this machine is supposed to suck up your spit. I've been sucking up my own spit for 40 years. I have never tried to suck up my adenoids, my tonsils. This machine will suck your eyeballs out of you. And you sit there fighting it. Now they come back and take the thing out. Now the dentist is going to drill. But before he drills, you notice that the right side of your face feels like it's sliding off of your skull. You notice that your bottom lip is now in your lap. So you'd like to discuss this with him and get the truth. Did he hit a nerve and this is it for you for the rest of your life? Or what? So you say, what? Beg your pardon? I'm finished. I am working with you about my attendance. About you what? About attendance. What about? Well, it is you to be delighted because of my attendance. You the same thing. Okay, rinse. Reverend, just you tell me, Reverend. I know how to model live. That's what you tell me, Reverend. Hard about the problem. Now you reach over and you grab one of these paper cups that they get on sale. You give about $1 million for a penny. Folded by people out of work. And just to show them, you put the water in your mouth and you shake it. Water going on your ear, up your nose. You grab it all and you put the water in your mouth, you hold your lips and shake your head. Now you want to spit into this miniature toilet bowl. So you don't have a bottom lip, so you just open your mouth and let it all fall out. And you say, thank God for gravity. Now you would like to sit back, but you can't. Because hanging from your bottom lip is a long line. And you can't get it off your lip. Or you can get it off if you want to be gross about it. Reach up, grab it, and throw it off. If you try to be cool, you want to shake it off. And you shake it, and then shake it over there, and then shake it over there. You try to blow it off, and all you do. So you think maybe if you sit back, it'll snap in half. You sit back, now you got a line from the bowl to your bottom lip, and then there's when you say, oh look, a rainbow. And they send you a bill for that. For making rainbows. Weird people. Then you can't talk all day. You go to the parking lot to get your car. Want your car? Yeah, that's blue. What kind you got? All the red ribbon. Weird.
Okay. You have 5 minutes now to generate as many ideas as you can. The kinds of things we can do that are free, take less than 10 minutes, and help our addict. Okay? On your mark, get set, go. count and see how many ideas you came up with in just 5 minutes now, remember, so it wasn't exactly as we spend all morning on it. How many? 24. Wow. Let's give them a hand. How many? Huh? 27. Wow. 28. 35. Sold for 35. Well, let's have some of the lower numbers. 18. Still good. 16. 17. Yes. 19. Isn't that amazing, though? It's amazing how, by just engaging in a little laughter, and I noticed one of the things I watched very closely was that you all seem to be enjoying working in the group, and that you dropped in some of your own humor there and things like that. And I know with my own workday, if I can go into a setting where I know we're going to really get something accomplished, but that we're going to enjoy working with each other, and that it's all right to smile and laugh, that's a very important thing. I wanted to, and somebody brought this up during break, that there is a distinguishing factor between nervous laughter when we're threatened and intimidated, and joyful laughter like a baby, you know, that when we're at ease. And oftentimes I know it's very important, especially for supervisors, to distinguish between those. People will often display their discomfort. And it's very important that we use laughter in a healthy and positive way. And I should stress that, too, that humor can be used very negatively. It can be used to put down and ridicule. And this morning we're talking entirely about positive humor that affirms us and shows that we care and we want to reduce people's anxiety and so on. Okay, we're going to move then. We've gone through 2 of the 3 objectives. We've talked about humor and holistic health. We've talked about creativity and humor, and creativity is turning ha-ha into aha, the discovery sound. And the last one, and a short issue it will be indeed because we want to be over to the lunch line in time, is to discuss the issue of humor and our attitude. And it is true, isn't it, that our attitudes towards life are something that we can control. Sometimes it's difficult to see that when we look back at periods of our life, or maybe we're in a period now where there are many challenges that keep our attitude from being entirely positive. But we do realize that the decision about our attitude is one that we must make. And it's a matter really of perspective, of keeping a proper perspective. And I received this letter, a friend of mine sent it to me, but it was a letter that a young lady sent to her mom and dad. She had gone off to college, and her mom and dad hadn't heard from her for a while, so she sent them this letter. And I think it's a perfect letter to illustrate the point of perspective. It goes like this: Dear Mom and Dad, since I left for college, I have been remiss in writing, and I am sorry for my thoughtlessness in not having written before. Before you read on, please sit down. Well, then, I am getting along pretty well now. The skull fracture and concussion I got when I jumped out the dorm window when it caught on fire shortly after my arrival is pretty well healed now. Now I can see almost normally, and I only get those sick headaches once a day. Fortunately, the fire in the dormitory and my jump were witnessed by an attendant at the gas station near the dorm, and he was the one who called the fire department and the ambulance. He also visited me in the hospital, and since I had nowhere to live because of the burnt-out dorm, he was kind enough to invite me to share his apartment with him. He is a very fine boy. We have fallen deeply in love, and we plan to be married. We haven't got the exact date yet, but it will be before my pregnancy begins to show. The reason for the delay in our marriage is that my boyfriend has a minor infection which has prevented us from passing our premarital blood test. I carelessly caught it from him. I know that you will welcome him into our family with open arms. He is kind, and although not well educated, he is ambitious. Although of a different race and religion than ours, I know your often expressed tolerance will not permit you to be bothered. Now that I have brought you up to date, I want to tell you that there was no dormitory fire. I did not have a concussion or skull fracture. I was not in the hospital. I am not pregnant. I am not engaged, and there is no boyfriend in my life. However, I am getting a D in algebra. Science, and I want you to see those grades in their proper perspective. So I guess what we're talking about is a matter of attitudes. I can remember when I was just in high school, I went to a Catholic school. We had nuns back in those days, and Sister Florentina directed our senior class play, and he gathered the cast together for our opening meeting. And said to the cast, he said, will all the boys with small male parts please stand over there? Everybody had a major role, it seems. Down to, in terms of attitudes, the third objective, is the attitude of the duck or the eagle. If you would you quack for me? And if you ever listen to people complaining, it sounds kind of like a duck pond. Oh, you know, I had to do this yesterday. You know, Billy never takes his shift, and so on and so forth. Let's hear that. Quack, quack, quack. Okay, now for eagles, it's different. Because eagles understand that, you know, we can't control relationships, we only participate, and that we do control our attitude. That's something that we can work on ourselves. So an eagle does this. We say, swoosh, swoosh. I have to do that. Everybody has to do it. Swoosh, swoosh. See, I have a little contract with deodorant companies, and but the eagle obviously is working. Now, I have done a lot of study. Over the last 20 years, I've really researched this issue, and I really didn't categorize it as ducks and eagles. But I did say this, that as you talk to people, and you listen to the kinds of things they say about themselves when they work, they begin to reveal to you whether they have the attitude of a duck, that is, they're complaining and they're blaming things on others, or whether they have the attitude of the eagle. And it's really important that it's something that we control, like that first chart I showed. Genetics, we don't have anything to do with. Lifestyle, we can do something. Attitude is something that we can positively work on, and we can watch our attitudes and see how we're looking at life. And one of the things I determined was that there were certain kinds of characteristics that you would find in the attitude of the duck. And the first thing I found was this. That in the duck attitude, the person does not like themselves. And it's called low self-esteem. That's what Maslow calls it. And it's a real big problem, not only among college students, but of adults. It's estimated that 85% of adult Americans have a negative self-image. Isn't that tragic? Why? Well, there are a lot of things. You know, we get a lot of put-downs in life. You know, haven't you got that done yet? Well, you didn't do that as well as you did it last time. You know, the soup's too cold. A lot of times in life we get a little negative feedback. And very seldom, oftentimes, we're often told just about our mistakes, not about our victories. Another thing is that if you watch TV, modern advertising has two messages for you. Number one, don't like yourself. And number two, you don't have enough. I was watching the NCAA basketball tournament, and there was an ad for gasoline. Now you might say, well, how could that hurt your self-image? Well, it was an ad for gasoline that featured a guy pumping iron. And he had triceps and quadriceps that bulged. And when he lifted, it just came down to a narrow wedge. Now, I have been to the beaches of California, Malibu, and everywhere, and there are very few human beings that look like that. You can look high and low, but there just aren't a whole lot of that type around. And the end product of it is, though, they give the kind of subtle message, you know, you could look that way if you tried hard. Now, for women, it's even worse. If you watch the Budweiser ads, now, women don't look like that in general. I don't know where they get those books. They must paint them or something. And there's a tragic one where they have some people who are kind of middle-aged walking through this thing, and they throw a coin in the fountain, and they turn into young, voluptuous women again. Just like saying it's wrong to be middle-aged, or something like that. You know, it's too bad you're not young. And so we kind of get this feeling that we're not doing well enough. And the message is, I don't like myself. The second one is you don't have enough. If you notice the car ads and things like that, how people are always racing off. And they drive those cars where there's no traffic. Have you noticed that? I wonder where they're going. Maybe, I guess, are there some people from Seward County here, aren't they? Yeah, I drove there yesterday. I gave a speech in Seward County yesterday, and I guess I ran on Route 23. There was a little stretch where I said, hey, I could be in the car ad. There's no other car. But you know, Seward County is a lovely community college too. But the end product of it is you get that message. Now, when I was working in New York last year, I would just be thrilled because you're sitting in 4 lanes of traffic all the time, in buses and so forth, and you know, oh, I would just love to drive this car someplace where I could go a couple miles without hitting the brake every 2 minutes and so on. So that message is there. A second thing is, and this is something that's bred into our young people, and that is, I don't like what I do. Now, I really enjoyed it this morning. I've had fun, and you've had fun, and we've enjoyed being around each other, and we've built a caring environment. But a lot of times, you know, you interview a little kid as little as 2nd or 3rd grade, what's your favorite subject? Recess. And we kind of act as if the work that we do is a distraction from our real purpose in life, which is to run around and do nothing. And actually, our work is what makes us who we are. That is why we are called professionals, because we enjoy and work at and become good at the kinds of things we do. And so it's a terrible message. If you listen to the radios of the young people, they have them plugged into their ear. What's Monday called? Blue Monday. Oh no, back to the job. What's Wednesday? Thursday. S-H-I-T. Sure happy it's Thursday. And then Friday is what? TGIF, right? As if we live for our distractions rather than live for what we do. What we do as professionals. As if it's part of a total being is their work, their play, their family life, their spiritual life, all of the things that make a total person. But our young people are given that message that work is a distraction. And a lot of times you hear people, oh, I have to go back to work. You know, it's just a kind of negative attitude. Well, what does this produce? That's all. Quack. Let's do it. Quack, 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 quack. Yeah. So listen, when you hear people say things, oh, you know, I weigh a little bit too much, I wish I was this, I wish I was that, you know, I don't like, I've got to do this afternoon. Just think to yourself, quack, quack, quack. You know, I don't want to be a quack, quack, quacker. I want to be somebody who I like what I do. Okay. The focus of control, now this is a very important issue. And if you study the psychological, sociological, and communication literature, you will find that the key issue in all of this is that the focus of control in these lives is external. Somebody else rings their chime for them. And that is being controlled by another, being controlled by television, being controlled by the feedback that comes into you. You know, and a lot of times, and I'll say this for my own work, a lot of times the only feedback I get in my job is when I make a mistake. Jim, you didn't get this in on time. You've got to watch this budget. That's been oversent. Can't you crack down on this? That's the feedback. Now, I view myself as a very talented and intelligent professional. And I am the one who has to say that to myself oftentimes. Because a lot of times the other messages in the environment are about your mistakes. And so attitude, see, the focus of control if you let that information that comes into you control your attitudes, then the focus of control is external. If you look at that ad and it makes you feel dissatisfied with yourself, then the focus of control is external. Somebody else is pulling your charm. And that is one thing that we really want to fight against. We really want to fight against the notion that other people are shaping our view of ourselves. Okay, let's look at the others. What is it? It's to be an eagle. And that means something that's very difficult. This is going to be the most shocking revelation of this whole morning. And it's illustrated by this cartoon. Take responsibility for my own life. It's legal. It is legal. And that is just the decision that we make. And so what does it take? Let's do eagle. Good. There's a little secret I'll give you right now. Inside of every duck, there is an eagle yearning to be let free. And so the eagle framework of things is really this. It starts with the three most important words in self-esteem. And that is, I like myself. So on three, I'd like to have you say, I like myself. 1, 2, 3. Great. Louder this time. 1, 2, 3. I like myself. Great. That is the key to the starting of the positive attitude. And it is simply a decision we make. Love is a decision. Self-esteem is a decision. Sure, we have to deal with the fact that we don't have everything in our life perfect, but we have to make that overall affirmation, I like myself. Because what? It means that we're free of playing games with other people, and we communicate as equals. It means that we're free, when you get negative feedback, to say to yourself, I like myself. I like myself. I like myself. So on three, let's say it one more time. 1, 2, 3. I like myself. And you know, one nice thing about it is you say those words, this room really just lights up with a smile. Because it's very, very hard to say the words, I like myself, and not at the same time have a smile. The second part of it, equally important, is 5 words, I like what I do. Let's say that on 3. 1, 2, 3. I like what I do. On 3, let's say, I like what I'm doing. 1, 2, 3. I like what I'm doing. Okay, that's the kind of attitude that makes a day. You know, a lot of times, the greatest days in my work day, and I'm sure the greatest days are yours, are the days you look up at the clock and say, oh, good grief, we're going to quit now. The day's over. And I can remember, you know, a lot of times, if you really have that negative attitude, you're just every moment, when is it going to be over? You know, it's kind of like Cosby in the dentist chair, you know, when are they going to take that needle out, you know? And the end product of it is, I know some of my greatest days, and this is, my secretary and I will be sitting there talking about something at the end of the day, and we'll look at the clock, and it'll be half an hour, beyond when we could have legitimately left. And you just kind of have the feeling that, well, this was really a good day. Why? Because we liked what we do. The end product of it is, this is what? Eagle. So let's all do eagle. Okay, very, very powerful. A very, very powerful kind of thing. The focus of control is internal. That is, we are in control of our life. And I have to say that this is a very strong theme of the feminist movement. It's a very strong theme in the literature of people who succeed. It is a very strong theme in people who have great spiritual values, because the focus of control is internal. Obviously, we gain stature, we gain love, and we gain self-respect in our relationship with others. But with the eagle framework, we never have to demand it or beg for it or ask for it. It just comes to us. It comes from us out of the joy and enthusiasm we have and the sense of being we have. You know, it's just an enormous thrill when you work in an atmosphere where there are a lot of egos. Because you hear compliments flying back and forth. You hear affirmations of each other flying back and forth. You hear laughter in the workplace. You hear people talking about the excitement of what's going on. And you know that that's an ego environment. And you know, and I work with healthcare, I work with banks, I work with community colleges, you know a lot of times there's pressures on us in these environments. And that economic difficulties face us. And that it's easy to become duckish at times because of the pressures. But we remember this, that the key in terms of attitude is, I like myself, I like what I do. So on three, let's say, I like myself. 1, 2, 3. I like myself. 1, 2, 3, I like what I do. I like what I do. And so this is a major theme of the whole business of attitudes, ducks and eagles. Listen to yourself, listen to the environment you're in. Do you hear duck talk or do you hear eagle talk? If you hear eagle talk, keep it up. If you hear duck talk, see if you can kind of gradually change that. So where have we been this morning? Well, we've been to 3 little stops in terms of humor in the healthy workplace. The first one has been the notion of holistic health. I'd ask you to find some ways to plug humor into your life. And I would like to thank you for being one of the best audiences I've ever had in terms of laughing and participating and enjoying what's been going on. The second thing is our objective has been to understand how creativeness flows from our ability to laugh and our ability to brainstorm for ideas and our ability to enjoy working with others. And the third element of it has been positive attitudes, which flows from our ability to like ourselves, like what I do, and then to focus internally on making decisions about who we are. And a lot of life decisions, you know, when I started working on this about 4 or 5 years ago, you know, I found that enormous changes began to flow over my life. And they weren't immediate, they weren't the kinds of things that you go, wow, it's like St. Paul getting hit by a bull of lightning, but they were just gradual changes in your relationship with people, in the relationships with the way you saw yourself, in the kinds of tasks you were willing to tackle. All of these things, then, help us to live constructively. I walked down the streets of a busy town watching workers tear a building down. With a yo-heave-ho and a lusty yell, they swung a beam and a sidewalk fell. I asked the foreman of that crew, is this crew as skilled as a crew that would build? Oh, no. No, indeed. Unskilled labor is all I need. We can tear down in a day or two what it would take skilled workers years to do. So I wondered as I went on my way, which of these roles I was trying to play. Am I one of those who walks life road with care, measuring each deed with a rule or a square? Or am I one of those who roam the town, content with the work of tearing down? Thanks for letting me be part of this conference.